Good morning, everyone. My name is Bridget Spann, and I manage Caretaker Farm with my husband, Don Cesada. And to be clear, he is the primary farmer, which means on this beautiful April sunny day, he is outside right now preparing the fields for spring. So I'm delighted to be here. And oftentimes, as far as co-managing our farm, I'm involved in a lot of the behind-the-scenes things like these things and negotiating leases. So prior to living at Caretaker Farm, which is in Williamstown, we were living in the Boston area, and Don was working for a nonprofit, the Food Project, which is a fantastic nonprofit, and it was many wonderful years there of a guaranteed income as a farmer, which is a nice treat. And the Food Project was leasing land on town conservation land. So the town leased land based on a 5-year lease. And it was a fantastic opportunity for Don to be with this organization, but there was never going to be any possibility that we could live on the land. So for him, it was not very satisfying to envision a lifetime of being a commuter farmer. And that was what brought us to our search for a long-term farming situation where we could live on the land. We heard about the opportunity at Caretaker Farm that Sam and Elizabeth Smith advertised through the Northeast Organic Farming Organization, through their publication. And our current role is that we have a 99-year lease on the land. We moved there at the end of 2004. The year 2005 was an incredibly busy year in which Leslie Reed Evans and myself and many others spent lots of time around many different tables trying to work out the details of this arrangement. And Equity Trust was another organization that was very instrumental in making this farm transfer happen. And so in March 2006, we managed to close the deal, and we had never purchased a house before, so this was our first closing, and it featured 12 or 14 people around the table and about 6 attorneys, and also our 2-year-old, because our 3 childcare options fell through that morning. So it was a really momentous day in many ways. And so in our current arrangement, we own all the buildings on the land. Williamstown Rural Lands Foundation owns the land. We pay a yearly lease fee to Williamstown Rural Lands Foundation for the use of the land. And we also pay taxes to the town of Williamstown for the land. And it is a very complicated arrangement. We are very happy with it. There's plenty of information about it on our website. I think my challenge when people call to talk about our situation, when they're looking at lease options for their personal situation, is when I start to explain it's a 99-year lease. Well, that already puts us in a different category than many people who are really trying to get a 1-year, 5-year, 10-year lease situation set up. How did we wind up in this relationship? We were very excited about integrating our family into the farm. We were very focused on sustainable farming. There are a lot of lease restrictions in our lease that would scare away many people. For us, most of the restrictions stated in our lease reflect our values anyway, so it's not a challenge for us to abide by the lease. And for us, it was really important to have long-term tenure on the land. It's very difficult to make smart farming decisions if you don't know if you're going to have access to that land next year. So Kathy mentioned about the conservation practices lagging on rented land, and I think one of the challenges is it's very hard to invest in some of those conservation practices that are best for the land if you're not sure that you're going to be there the following year to reap the benefit of the conservation practices. We also needed to have an affordable opportunity. We were initially looking in Maine because there was no way that we even imagined that we could afford to live in Massachusetts. And this is after Don apprenticed on a farm for 2 years in Amherst. We had lived in the Boston area for 7 or 8 years, and we would have loved to live in Massachusetts, but weren't even considering it because of the cost. So we were looking in Maine, and we kept getting further, as we got more and more affordable, it got further and further away from any markets. So it was only this opportunity with Caretaker Farm and the involvement of Williamstown Rural Lands Foundation that made it even possible for us to consider Berkshire County. The other part that was really important to us is to address climate change in our lives, and we were looking for ways to live more locally, and it's been fantastic to be at Caretaker Farm, to be in a long-term situation and to say, all right, you know, those dreams about the solar panels that we've been talking about for years, we are going to find a way to make those happen. Getting a composting toilet on site at the farm. All different things that relate to climate change and feeling like we're being responsible people on this planet. It's been fabulous for us to start to live out some of those values in very concrete ways. As far as the challenges to land access and tenure for farmers and landowners, I think the expense of the land is a huge thing. For us coming into this situation, we didn't expect to make a ton of money farming. It would be, as Don said at one point, only a farmer could be impressed with my then social worker salary. And I feel like we were two pretty financially responsible people. We had many years of 2 income and no children, and still for us it felt very daunting to imagine how we could ever purchase land. Lots of the land is open and it's not readily available for farmers. And I very much appreciated Rural Land's willingness to say it's not enough about preserving open farmland, but to make sure there's a way for the farmer to be there on the land. And also that landowners don't necessarily feel comfortable granting a long-term lease. They might be worried about liability, worried about being taken advantage of, worried about keeping their options open. But that same dynamic means farmers can't necessarily make long-term plans. They can't invest in the infrastructure. They can't plan their business decisions that may take 3 to 5 years to implement if they don't know come the end of the year or the middle of the year that the owner is going to say, actually, you can't be here next year. As far as what needs to happen in Berkshire County, not that some of this is already happening, but I think outreach to landowners and the community is really important to impress upon everyone how important this issue of local food is. I think also an organization or a person to walk the landowners through the process. It's so helpful for landowners to be able to talk to other landowners. It's helpful for farmers to be able to talk to other farmers about this process. The availability of sample leases, whether it's 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, that they would be publicized, and even with references from people who use the leases, because I think very much from landowner to landowner, they can really speak about their fears or concerns to each other, and the farmers have a whole other set of concerns. The other thing is creative ways to make it possible for farmers to live on the land. So for more land trusts and other people to consider farmland preservation that includes the farmer on the land. I know for us, we wouldn't be here in Berkshire County if it weren't possible for us to live on the land that we're farming. So thank you very much.
We're going to talk here now from Leslie Reed Evanson. I just want to pick up on one thing that I skipped over in my discussion which Bridget raised, is that it's not just the land, it's the housing issue as well for farmers and farm labor. So we need to think about how to couple those things. And the ground lease that Bridget described is one method or one tool for that. Okay, Leslie, thanks.
Thank you everyone for being here on this wonderful day. And we were talking about what we might rather be talking about. I'd rather be talking about birding, but no, not really. We are a small land trust in Williamstown and have worked since about 1986 on preserving the farms in Williamstown. We do have some. They're good farms. We have wonderful farmers and a farm community. And we have invested a lot of our time, money, and energy into preserving these farms. And during the 90s, we began to realize that it was not enough to preserve the farmland, but we need to think more holistically about preserving farming. And the elements of preserving farming included a very strong and sustainable farm economy and the affordable transfer of farms. And that actually coincided with Sam and Elizabeth Smith, owners of Caretaker Farm at that time, thinking about the transfer of the farm to their next farmers. And so it was a really nice contribution of two things coming together at one time. And so we first worked with Sam and Elizabeth to place their farm into the Agricultural Preservation Restriction Program. And that was a good step, and it did preserve the farmland, but it didn't really lower the value of the farm very much, especially in Williamstown where land is quite valuable. And so we had to think of creative ways to think about the transfer of the farm, and we used the model of Indian Line Farm in South Egremont. I don't know if Al or Elizabeth are here today. No. But the Smiths had known Robin Van Ent and really liked the community land trust model. And so the Williamstown Rural Lands Foundation looked into becoming a community land trust. And that would mean that we would hold land, but look into these long-term lease and other tenure options, land tenure options. And it was interesting because we think in perpetuity as a land trust, so 99 years is not a lot of time for us. But on the other hand, there weren't really very good lease models at that time, and so we were developing this project at the same time the leases were being developed. And Bridget will tell you that it was not an easy process at all. And in fact, I think we were still modifying the lease the day before the closing. So, and one of the challenges with this sort of, it's supposed to come later, but I will talk about now, is that you need to craft a lease that's going to do the things, satisfy the things that you wanted to do over 99 years, but still be flexible enough to allow for changes, because obviously in 99 years things are going to change. And so how do you craft something that fits all of that? And it was difficult, and I think there are things that we could change about the lease, but it is working, and we're absolutely thrilled that it worked for Don and Bridget, who've been wonderful farmers on the land. The community land trust model has worked very well for affordable housing, and it hadn't really been used much for affordable farming. And so we were actually the first land trust to complete a project of this sort. So it was really a model project for other land trusts. And since then, quite a few land trusts have done the same thing. And we would like to do another project like that. The challenge is coming up with the funds to purchase the land so that we can hold it. We have not very many, we don't have too many, we don't have to do a lot with Caretaker Farm because Don and Bridget are such great managers. We own the land, but in all intents and purposes, it's their land. They farm it. I can't just go skipping down there anytime I want and take pictures or pick flowers because it's their property even though we own it, and we really try to respect that. And we appreciate all they do to manage it well. As a landowner, normally a land trust does not pay taxes on their land, but because this is supporting a business, that is why Don and Bridget pay the taxes on the property. So in terms of undertaking farm preservation projects and the investment of time and energy, we just feel it's protecting our investment to make sure that the farms are affordably transferable. And the housing is a big issue. There are farms that could be split up, farms with a large land base that maybe would be better as smaller farms, but you have housing issues. And so it's not only the existing value of the housing on the farms now, but where land can support farming, where our house is going to be related to that. And I think that that's an issue that we need to discuss. Landowners who are committed to this affordable farm transfer are obviously very important to these projects. If Sam and Elizabeth Smith hadn't wanted to make this work, it would have been impossible. And so they were willing to and basically sell their farm for less than its full value to make this work. And so that's an important element and something to think about when undertaking a project such as this. And another issue for our land trust, we're run by a board of directors. This project took about 10 years to really finish. And over that time, our board of directors changed, and we started with a very gung-ho Caretaker Farm Project board, and we ended up with a less gung-ho Caretaker Farm Project board, which is unfortunate because, you know, a lot of us thought it was a really wonderful project and we're very proud of it. But as a nonprofit, you know, you have that change in personality over time, and that was really a challenge too for us, and something to keep in mind. I think that challenges around land access and tenure for farmers are financial support for land trusts so that they can take the role in these projects, because in a lot of communities they are the group that are doing these farm projects and helping farmers either preserve their land or do the land transfers. And so supporting land conservation in that aspect is important. And farmland that's not under preservation is usually valued quite high. And Norris Phelps, who was a great farmer in Williamstown, prior owners of Cricket Creek Farm, said, what's a farmer to do? It's not land, it's real estate, and that's really the issue. You can't just buy the field next door when it comes up for sale because it's valued as about a building lot. And so that really makes it hard. And then the challenge of doing the long-term leases. And I think that they will change over time just as farming changes over time and just as the personnel changes over time. And I was trying to think, did we require organic farming? I don't think we did in the lease. Because we were thinking that perhaps in the future organic farming would not be the same as we think of it now, and so you don't want to tie someone into some kind of farming that isn't actually viable in the future. And so those are the kind of things that you really need to think about, and it takes a long time. And I think the leases should be able to be as flexible as the changes in farming. My own experience in talking with farmers that I know is the access to land. There's so much competition for land in Williamstown, and just recently we've had a 17-acre, what's now a cornfield, sort of being taken out of production because it belongs to Fish and Wildlife, and they would like to return it to wildlife habitat. And we certainly understand why that has to happen, but 17 acres is a difficult amount of land to get anywhere else in Williamstown. And so we need to look at those alternative parcels that might be available to take that place. And then what else I think needs to be worked on is to continue to work on making sure that farmers who do lease land have secure leases, which is what Kathy was talking about, and also to identify those parcels that maybe could be reclaimed as farmland, and that's an expensive thing, but there are some lands that have been farmed in the Berkshires historically that have grown up, maybe shrublands now, which could be returned, and perhaps there's a way to find grants for that sort of thing. And also to continue to work on the housing aspect, which I think is a really critical thing, access to good farm housing so that people can live on the land and farm at the same time. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. That was incredibly validating and moving experience to hear these people have their real experiences, their vision. Bruce, I totally believe that something can get worked out for you, and I would like, with Rick's indulgence, to take 5 minutes of questions, and they can be directed to anybody on the panel. Yes, ma'am.
How does the 99-year lease, can you transfer it to another member of your family?
Yes.
Can you transfer it to another farmer?
Yes.
And then would continue another 99 years, or?
Yes.
Or just the duration of that 90? Looking at the gray hair tweaking, and I can see you don't have 99 years.
We eat really healthy food. We're planning for longevity, so just wait.
Any other questions?
The land trust will be there for more than 99 years, though.
And if the land trust doesn't happen to be there, you're obligated to pass that holding to another land trust.
Yes.
So there is some,
Yes, it's Berkshire Natural Resources Council.
So
Yeah,
this-
it's under Ryan.
So, for those who have like requirements for, as farmers to be stewards of the land, how are you guys quantifying that? And how are like the land trust and the landowners auditing progress on the conservation?
This is a great question, because at the end of our project, I think there was a lot of fear on the land trust part that they were going to have to invest a lot of energy monitoring this project. And I think it's probably fair to say that the development of the project required more energy than the 7 or 8 years since we closed the deal. So we are a community-supported farm. Farm members are welcome to come to our farm any day but Sunday to walk the land. Our practices are very open to the public. We have the whole list of restrictions that are spelled out in the lease to sort of ease the land trust's worry about the monitoring. As part of the lease agreement, we came to the decision that we would have to submit a report at the end of the year that would demonstrate our compliance with the lease, and then if they had a need for further information, they would be welcome to ask for it. I think also we live in a small town, so there are many land trust board members who are our farm members, so there's not a whole lot of, it's very open for scrutiny, and we're very proud of our practices also, so it's not something that we're trying to hide.
And I just want to add that I didn't mean to imply that Don and Bridget don't allow me to come to the farm. They're very welcoming anytime I want, but it has been very easy for us in terms of the land trust management, and we also because we're the landowners, we get the monitoring reports from DAR for the agricultural preservation restriction, and so there's actually 2 sets of eyes on the ground, but we have absolutely minimal energy really put into monitoring at this point, other than as we would any conservation property.
Okay, we'll take 3 more quick questions. Yes, ma'am.
Did you run into what you would call any governmental structure or policy issues which, I mean, you might have gotten this through because you were all so unique and worked so hard on it, and if you were going to try to, others were going to try to reproduce this, would they be running into heavy roadblocks that you might have gotten past, but that you need to analyze for the rest of us so that we know how to look for them?
I don't think so. The biggest issue was whether we could function as a community land trust, even though we were set up as a conservation land trust. But because this is considered a conservation project and preserving farmland is part of our mission, it was determined that there wasn't really any legal difference in our organizational structure to prevent us from holding land for, in this case, farming and housing, because we do own the land underneath the housing structures as well. And so that was probably, and then I think from a financing standpoint, the issues which Jen also mentioned is having banks support these sort of non-traditional land tenure situations, and having them be willing to give a mortgage where here's a landowner who doesn't really own land but is subject to a 99-year lease. But that's not an unusual setup. I mean, the Empire State Building is built on leased land, so that's not that unfamiliar.
Okay, 2 more. I know hands are starting to pop up, so I want to respect our agenda, and maybe we'll have a little bit more time. Yes?
What will happen with the lease when, Bridget's, when they are going to be ready to stop farming?
Either end. They can seek out their own replacements, subject to our approval of the new farmers, and if they can't find a farmer, then it becomes incumbent on our land trust to replace them. And that was one of the issues with our board, is that they were concerned that we'd end up with this farm and no one to run it. But my philosophy then and still is, if we can't find a farmer for a caretaker farm, then there are no farmers.
And they will have to move out? They will have to move out of the land?
I don't know. In this case, there's actually 2 houses, so it's possible that if Don and Bridget are there long enough, they might be able to take over where Sam and Elizabeth live now. But otherwise, yes, the people who live in the house need to be the farmers on the land.
That's a really good question, and Bruce raised it as well, as sort of the housing relationship to the land, the housing relationship to subsequent successors, and how that all plays out. So 1 more question. Yes, ma'am.
Did any of you have any contact with your respective agricultural commissions in your towns? And did that play a role?
We did not have an agricultural commission at that time. We now have quite an active one, of which I'm a member. And I think that we would definitely be more involved as a commission. We are trying to be very active in our farm community, but we did not have an agricultural commission at